Hello everyone, I'm Kev from Deadstar Publishing, and today I've got Dave Clifford and Pete Rogers with me, who are some of the authors and artists who work with Deadstar. We've been asked to provide a panel for Swansea Comic Con, so before we go much further, I know these guys already, but you two should sort of introduce yourselves.
Seeing as it looks like you're drinking mead, Dave, I think you should go first.
It's Vimto. There's product placement there straight away. I'm Dave Clifford. I'm the artist for Seven Shades and Dexter Docen. Yeah. I can't really think of what else to say there. I'm hit the wall.
So far, it's all been true, so that's good. That's good
So
stuff.
that's good. Yeah, I think I can't really say I can do anything else really. Over to you.
Thank you, David. I'm Pete Rogers. I'm the co-creator, and I can't go as far to say the writer of Seven Shades because it feels like it does Dave a disservice. I'm
You do the hard work.
the one who helps with the plotting and then makes up the words that go into what the people say. But I guess that's the writer. But I guess when we talk about our process a bit more, it'll become more clear why I'm kind of downplaying my part. But yeah,
we do have a process on it.
We do, honest. That's me.
So you've touched upon sort of Seven Shades a little bit. That's not the only things that you guys do though, because Pete, for example, is the writer behind Flux.
This is correct. Look at that.
And Dave is also the artist for another one of our series, which is Seven Shades. Nope, other way around.
Nope.
Dexter doesn't. So
you like numbers, Dave. I just realised actually you like numbers in your titles.
Yeah, and I only work with people from Bournemouth as well.
That's also true. Wow. Yeah.
It's a niche.
So Pete, do you want to tell us a bit about Flux? Because that's not one of ours, but sort of, I'm trying to promote your other work as well. Because
yeah, Flux is a book that came out, I was going to say last year, but due to the pandemic, I mean the year before, because last year's kind of been wiped from my mind. But it came out in 2019, crowdfunded on Kickstarter, co-written with Steve Arian and with Mason Barza as the artist. It was the first issue in a mini-series. We did plan to crowdfund the second issue last March. We had all the campaign and everything ready, but as I say, the pandemic kind of hit and we put that on hold, and we've never quite got it back up and running because of lots of reasons that I won't go into, just circumstance changes for all the people involved in the book really. But it's kind of a real world kind of sci-fi book, bit of a conspiracy theory kind of angle. It was an idea that Steve, who's also a fantasy author, a very successful one, he pitched to me as an idea for us to co-write, and we kind of took his initial idea, co-plotted it, and then brought Mason on board as the artist, and then managed to successfully kickstart the first issue in 2019.
Congratulations on that, and hopefully we will see more of it at some point in the future.
Fingers crossed.
And Dave, you've got sort of Seven Shades, which I'm sure we'll talk about a bit more in depth as we go on. But so Dexter's Half Dozen, what is it?
It's a World War II horror. You've got Sergeant Freeman of the newly formed SAS, who has to lead a ragtag bunch of criminals and misfits from the British Army behind enemy lines to rescue Britain's top spy from Himmler's occult headquarters. But little do they know that when they get there, there's an ancient vampire lord who's reigning over the SS.
So just your bog standard, supernatural fare, really.
It's run of the mill, yeah. But yeah, Jay and I always try to do something different with that. So we always try to be original with the stories and the events and random things that the team seem to get themselves into.
Well, I know who Jay is, and Peter knows who Jay is, but for the audience at home, Jay is Jamie Lambert, who's the writer for Dexter's Half Dozen.
Yes, correct.
So, okay. So we know sort of roughly what you guys have sort of been working on most recently, but how did you both get into comics?
I'll let Pete answer that. Professional.
I don't know about that. In terms of reading comics, that was like from a very young age, but things like Whizzer and Chips and kind of like British comics like that. And then I started reading Secret Wars, the Marvel book. Well, I started reading Spider-Man and then Secret Wars, which made me realize that there were all these like huge universe of characters. And then Action Force, which was the British name for G.I. Joe. I read the whole run of that. And then got really into comics for years. And then kind of in my like later teens, I kind of drifted away from it pretty much. And then years later, I was on my first ever kind of beach holiday, 2 weeks, and I'd taken books with me and I kind of read all the books. I was a bit bored of just lying in the sun, getting redder and redder. And so I thought I'd just go to the shop and see if there's any, like, they got any books. And there happened a whole stand of Marvel and DC books that were out. This was in kind of the late 90s. And so I grabbed a load and I was like, oh, they're really good. They're really good. And then I went back and kind of bought all the seminal stuff like Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns and stuff. And then at the time I was kind of doing bits of screenwriting and trying to kind of make it as a filmmaker. But I suddenly thought, well, hang on a second. I really enjoy reading these comics. I've been reading comics on and off, since a very young age. So I guess someone has to write, because as a kid I was like, I just thought Stan Lee wrote all comics, or the artist just drew whatever they wanted because I was stupid. But as an adult I realized that, well, I did the thing I always do with stuff, I suppose. I got interested in it and then I just bought a load of books and I read comics on, I think it's Comics Writers on Comics Writing, I think was the name of the first book that I read by a guy called Mark Salisbury. And that was interviews with loads of writers about their process and stuff. And off the back of that, I started writing comic scripts, started pitching to anthologies, got a few things in a couple of American anthologies. And then off the back of that, I founded Orangutan Comics, which is still going, now part of Marcosia. And we started self-publishing an anthology title called 11th Hour, which got nominated for an Eagle Award, which was our first thing I'd ever had published, got nominated for an Eagle Award. So that was a good start. And then after that, did a few more things with them, did a book called The Interactives for Marcosia. And then I've just kind of done various bits and pieces, I suppose, since really. So I kind of fell into it. I think back then it was when the only convention really was Bristol. So I live in Cardiff now. I did live in Swansea at one point. I live in Exeter in between, and kind of all those places are not that far from Bristol. So I just made a point of kind of going to Bristol every year, networked with people, got to know as many people as I could, asked loads of questions. And thankfully, live in an age of the internet. So finding artists, not including Dave, actually. I found Dave in a pub. You always find Dave in a pub. Notwithstanding Dave, most of the artists I've worked with are people that I've found on forums. Remember forums? So online really, and I've worked with people from, I think I worked out 5 continents the other day, artists wise. Are there? Yeah, there are 5 continents. I think so. So yeah, so I was just very lucky really to kind of, because I'm quite organized and kind of quite what's the word? Driven, I suppose, because it's a lot of work, especially when you start putting out stuff yourself. So I've kind of drifted away from the self-publishing a bit, apart from when we did Flux for the Kickstarter, and then get to work with lovely people like Kev, putting books out on my behalf.
Yep, I do try. So that's a bit of introduction on Pete. How about Dave? How did you get into comics?
Well, like Pete, really reading like Wizard and Chips. My sister used to have all the old annuals, like Core, Wizard and Chips, and all the old British like Beano and Dandy comics and annuals. So I grew up reading that. My next door neighbour was a massive 2000 AD Judge Dredd fan, and he sort of got me into Judge Dredd and 2000 AD, and I think I sort of went more towards that, and then reading a bit of Eagle with Doom Lord, rather than go towards the Marvel stuff, and it was always that which interested me more. So yeah, I and then when Eastman and Laird did the Turtles when I was in school, I got into that before it was a cartoon. So I sort of missed out the whole Marvel DC thing really, and just went like the independent straight through. And I think that's had a bit of an effect. I think the closest I come through mainstream was like Lobo, when that first came, when Bisley's Lobo and all that. So yeah, that's what I've been. That's what got me into comics. And then when I was in school, I used to mess around and do like little comics like with my mates. And again, when I was in college and uni, just doing like little comic strips. And then when I met Jamie, when he moved down to Wales, he's an avid comic reader, and at the time he wanted to write a comic. He didn't know I wanted to draw a comic, and one day we just got talking, and then we just, in the middle of the conversation, one of us went, "Do you want to do a comic?" And the other one went, "Yeah, right then," and we did, and that's how Dexter's was born.
So kids at home, if you're sort of watching this and think you've got an idea and you've got a mate, make something.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's just a matter of seeing if you can do it, and basically just putting yourself out there and just doing it. Really, there's nothing really stopping you. That's what I found, anyway.
I think that's how a lot of sort of self-taught, self-published people get into the industry. Is they want to make something, they don't really know how to do it, so they just go ahead and do it, and then 10 years later, all of a sudden, some of them are doing it for a living.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm not sure if it was Pete or Dave that said about the book on tips, but sort of, what would you guys recommend for sort of, it was you, was it Dave?
No, that was Pete.
Oh, okay. What would you two sort of recommend for people to look into for how to get into actually making their own comics these days? Because you mentioned sort of you had a chat with Jamie, and sort of between the two of you, you just started. But for a lot of people who don't necessarily have that sort of camaraderie in place, are there any sort of external tips? Are there any sort of external tools that you could recommend, both of you, for people who are wanting to get in but don't really know where to look?
Well, Pete touched on the Bristol Comic Cons. They were amazing back in the day. But what we found useful was just going up towards some of the artists and the writers and all the creators, in the independents and mainstream, and just having a chat with them and finding out what, just basically asking for tips and advice, and what would be the best thing that we could do. And like, the 99% of them were absolutely amazing, and they pointed us in the right direction. The small 1% were far too busy.
It was me.
Yeah, I knew you from somewhere.
Yeah, I'd say the same. I mean, I remember when I first started going to conventions, I did, people call it just doing the circuit. You just keep walking around in a circle. And despite my ability to pretend not to be, I'm actually very shy. Cue laughter from Dave. I am actually very shy. So I was awful. I was like, if I make eye contact, they'll force me to buy their book. And by the time I've done the whole loop, I'll have spent like £1,000. Don't make eye contact with anybody. And I did, the first few times I went, I was very much like that. And then I thought, well, you can do this and get nothing out of it, apart from some very good things to read. But if you actually want to do this, you've actually got to kind of go past that bit and just ask people. And yes, there will be a few people that are a little bit standoffish, but comics is, in general, people don't mind giving you a leg up, and they'll be like, oh, actually, I know someone that can help, or it's not really our cup of tea, but someone else, or someone will go, oh, have an ash can, because actually I can explain to you how we approach that book. And it's like, and it kind of, there's a pay it forward thing, I suppose. As soon as I was then on the other side of the table, I was quite happy. And it was only like probably 2 years after that, I was doing portfolio reviews for people, which was very odd, a very odd jump from how do I do this to, oh, yes, let me look at your art. Let me see if if you've got your anatomies right and your perspective and stuff. But you've got to put yourself out there. That'll be the thing. It's kind of, it's a weird thing because creative people tend to be slightly introverted, but particularly if you're putting your own stuff out there, you have to be a self-marketer and you have to network. So you almost have to get out of your comfort zone. I'm sure there are people that are far more talented than me that have never had anything made just because they haven't taken that leap or they can't get past themselves, if that makes sense. So I think I would just ask people, and people are really friendly. I think it's a bit tougher. Like, for me, it was like buy the books, go on forums. But I think one thing I'd say about online now, everything is so splintered. It's probably there's probably not any one good source to go to. I would say go to YouTube, but the challenge you've got there is for every excellent interview or talking head that gives you brilliant advice, there'll be an absolutely terrible one of someone who doesn't really know what they're talking about. And it's very hard to curate that stuff. So, but so I'd say reach out to people. and do that. I mean, I've certainly done that a lot more for other things during the pandemic, is just saying, hey, have you got time to do a quick video call? Because certainly last year people were more available and actually did seem to be more helpful.
And hopefully, so once we get back to more normal times, things like Swansea Comic Con, there's a big sort of comics village there. I missed the old Bristol convention. I missed the Bristol convention was still running, but sort of maybe someday it'll return. But things like sort of Thought Bubble up in Yorkshire and sort of MCM with the sort of comics villages they have there. Fantastic place to meet sort of lots of different folks.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy for us to say, oh, Bristol was great and it was the main one, because at the time it was an easy one for us to get to. But actually, the great thing about the fact there are so many conventions now, like when I lived in Swansea, there wasn't a Swansea convention. Otherwise, I'd have been going to that. I think I went to a comic mart in the Angel Hotel in Cardiff was the first thing I went to. And
I remember those.
Met Mark Buckingham there and bought some of his art, a page of his art so I could ask him about making comics. That was my kind of, I thought, well, there's a queue here. To get in the queue, I have to buy art. Okay, I'll buy some art. And then while I'm here, I'm gonna pick his brains. But I think the good thing is the fact, well, mixture of things. The fact there are conventions all around the country means more people can be immersed in comics. I think it's really good. And actually, things like this, where virtual conventions, I appreciate it's not the best circumstances for these sort of things to have started, but actually, maybe in the future, all conventions can also do things online, because then no matter where you are, or if you've got accessibility issues, or you are too shy or too nervous to go to an event, then everyone can have access to this kind of information. I think that really kind of democratizes the industry a little bit, which I'm a big fan of.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more there. That sort of MCM, I think, have got the Welcome to the Multiverse or something similar to that as their sort of overarching digital Comic Con. Swansea's doing a digital Comic Con. Various other places have done sort of digital Comic Cons over the year, and I hope that sort of as things continue, they will continue.
Yeah, because even if, I mean, it could be a hybrid approach of doing some bits online with things in a venue, or you could have your yearly or twice yearly kind of in person, but you could have a smaller things, particularly aimed at different areas, like different bits of the small press or different niches, or specifically at kind of helping people that want to break in. I think there's also ways, I think different conventions could join forces to do stuff that's available to everybody. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's all really good.
I'd have to agree with everything you both said, to be honest. I think the things like this with the pod, the panels and that are going online. I think that's going to be the way of going forward with a lot of places.
Yeah,
it can be integrated.
It also saves on travel costs, because every other weekend I used to be sort of 100 miles this way, 100 miles that way, and so if you're going international, it's even harder. But so whilst it's nice to not have to travel so much, on the other hand, I miss it. So yeah,
it's nice to have a little adventure.
Yeah,
we've had a few of those at conventions, Dave.
Yeah, hopefully we'll have some more.
So you mentioned earlier picking up the piece of art from Mark. How about sort of some of your other influences? Whose work do you look up to? Whose work do you, I don't want to say copy, because we don't want to copy. You want to sort of, have your own slant on things, your own sort of spin on to different ideas. But whose work has inspired how you approach your works?
Go on, Dave, it's got to be your turn.
Make me want to swear now. Damn it. There we go. That's as close as I'm going to get. I'm trying to behave. I got it. Freezing up. Storytelling wise, it's basically just 2000 AD, just the old staples, no. See, I knew Pete would have to go first with this. Pete, take over.
Your Pat Mills is your sort of, the greats of British greats, because there's a big difference between sort of British creations and American creations, I've noticed.
Yeah, the American ones, I mean, they're all very, I'm not slinging mud, I'm not saying they're crap. I'm just saying that there is a difference between American and British storytelling. And I think with the British storytelling, there's always that edge. And that's what I've always gone for. With the stories I've read over the years, like Pat Mills, people like that, Alan Moore, I couldn't forget that. But art-wise, the ones that have really stood out for me growing up were like Mike McMahon, Kev O'Neill. Bisley's been a massive influence. So I, never hope to be in his league. And even gone on to like the old sleazy B-movie posters you used to see in the old video shops of Enzo Scotti, and like fine artists like Julia Keller and Bernie Wrightson. Those have been the biggest ones for me.
I'm going to say Brian K. Vaughan by quite a long way, because there's lots of writers that I really like Jason Aaron, say Alan Moore, Frank Miller. There's people whose work I gravitate towards, but
yeah,
I'll pretty much read anything that Brian K. Vaughan does, because, and I kind of almost, I'm sure I wrote a blog post about this about 6 years ago called "What Would BKV Do," which is about kind of, Why the Last Man is probably one of my favorite comics of all time, but I'll mention Saga, because what I learned from reading Saga was how you can make the audience care about a character within about 2 or 3 pages. And once I realized how good he was at doing that, I went back and read all of his books and all of his first issues in particular, because coming up with endings for stories is really hard. I think in comics in particular, coming up for beginnings of stories is also equally hard, because you've got to hit people straight out of the bat visually, and you've also got to make the characters compelling. And I think that's what I've tried to take from Brian K. Vaughan, is like emotionally hook the reader as early as you can, because once you've done that, then you can do whatever you want. Like a book like Saga does some stuff that even Dave might think was crazy. And there's things in there just like, I'm looking at a giant naked creature that's across 2 pages. Why? And then you go, but I care about the character, so they can do whatever they want with the world, and they really do. And I think I've kind of tried to bring that to Seven Shades, because Dave is like an ideas machine. He literally, I thought I was good at coming up with stuff quickly and going off in different areas, until I started working with Dave, and I was like, I don't know if I've got any ideas. I don't know if I've got any at all. The guy literally is like a machine gun of ideas, to the point I've had to sometimes say, Dave, please stop. Can you just not say any more ideas at me, because my brain is actually going to explode.
I think you have to have a day if you just telling me to shut up at once.
I did. It was a very awkward conversation. I guess it's important with your collaborators, I guess, to be honest.
I took it well.
To be honest, you did. You didn't speak to me.
I have a problem.
You were fine after. But it's that thing of like, but it has so many ideas. So part of my role on the book has been take all these ideas and try and squeeze them together to get a narrative spine, I suppose. But also it's like, okay, when we talked about this, Dave, we met, so one of the many times we met in the pub, because that's where we break the story, basically. It's a great idea. Yeah. And I kind of took this kind of Brian K. Vaughan approach, certainly not at the level he's at, but certainly from this, okay, how do we make people care about these characters enough that we can bring all Dave's craziness onto the page, and not have it all feel just like someone's got loads of ideas they want to stick in a story. You know what I mean? Yeah. There is a reason for it. There's payoffs in the plot. There's kind of foreshadowing. There's kind of stuff where the specific characters, you care about them enough to allow them to fight circus midgets.
Oh yeah, Seven Shades has a lot of different things in there.
It does.
In fact, when Dave first pitched Seven Shades to me, and I said, that's a great idea, let's run with it, I was expecting something slightly different to what actually sort of turned up on my desk in the end. Now, nothing wrong with what turned up on my desk in the end. In fact, I've got sort of one of the copies here. So this, when I'm opening this up, I'm sort of thinking, okay, great. So let's read through it. And so when Dave has said that this thing is going, is any of the story Dave actually pitched in this book? Turns out no. It's going to and this is also, Dave can tell the story on that one.
And well, as I write it with him, I'm the same, because Dave, it was at a Cardiff convention.
Yes.
We sat in a pub, and Dave went, do you fancy sounds like he's really crept up to me. Went, do you fancy doing a book together? We did know each other before this, by the way. We'd met through like the local comic scene and through conventions and stuff. Do you fancy doing a comic together? I'm like, oh yeah, okay. I thought, oh, this is good, because being a writer in independent comics is a bit like being a man in the world of dating, where there's a lot, everyone wants everyone else, but nobody particularly wants you. So you're fighting for, there's all these beautiful artists and everyone wants them, but there's only one of you, if that makes sense. So an artist coming to me with an idea is like, oh, this might actually get finished. This will get done. I wouldn't have to pay for it. All these things go through your head. So I was like, oh, okay. But equally, I was like, but what's the idea? And yeah, the same thing happened to me. Dave pitched me this amazing high concept. And how many, we've written 7 issues so far. We haven't even got close. We're nowhere near it. We will get there. But
I think I pitched the end to you first.
I think, it feels like we're writing the prequel to the book that you told us about.
Yeah.
But it's been good fun, because I'm hoping we do get there. Although I think the story would work if we never got there. So that's okay. Kind of.
It's evolved.
That's one of the sort of wonderful things about the method we've gone down with this one, because we've got sort of, each arc has now become its own thing, so a self-contained arc, and then between each arc we've got the sort of the bookenders, which this was the most recent thing we released. So this came out November of 2019.
Wasn't last Thought Bubble, it was Thought Bubble before last. Yeah,
just before the plague.
But there will be sort of more of that, and so with each sort of thing being a self-contained piece, even if we don't get to Dave's original story, there's still plenty of fantastic action, and as you mentioned, sort of cannibal clown midgets is just one episode.
Yeah, they're only supposed to be in the one issue, but Pete liked them that much, he wrote them back in.
Oh, that's a spoiler. That hasn't come out yet.
That
issue hasn't come out yet, though.
Or
do they? Or do they?
Haven't we? 2 issues haven't come out yet. No,
I know, that's the thing.
No, didn't happen. Oops.
No, we have, yeah. So we're 2 issues ahead of that. I guess we've got 2 issues in I'll say in the can, but in more or less done. But I think it's been good, because I think if we'd done exactly what Dave had in mind, being brought in as the kind of co-writer with an artist, I probably wouldn't have had that much to do. But I think because it was like, well, this is what I want to do, and I did the thing of like, well, okay, but why is that person going to end up there? Because it's cool, okay, but why? Apart from being cool, what else? Who is this person? Tell me more about them. But having said that, Dave
that was a mistake, wasn't it?
Because then Dave sent me about 4,000 pages worth of backstory for everybody, and then as we knew the backstory, we started trying to weave it in. And I was like, this idea is going to kind of implode. So one of the good things with the bookends that you mentioned, Kev, is that the main, I guess, each 4-issue arc is driving the story forward, but each bookend is giving you a little bit of kind of background on the characters, while also moving you could read just the main arcs and not read the bookends, but you shouldn't do that.
No.
But you could do that. But I don't think you could probably read the standalones on their own, maybe not. But it's that kind of thing. We're rewarding the reader with more kind of meatier stuff, really. And I think, in this world where kind of TV has overtaken film, and kind of people are used to really good kind of episodic storytelling, we're kind of trying to do that kind of approach, really. And it's been the most fun I think I've ever had working on a book, because it's just, well, I get to spend time with Dave, which is good, and have a few drinks every now and then, although we haven't for a very long time now, which is very sad. Yeah, very soon.
You get bombarded by ideas every 5 seconds.
Oh, that's true. It has been it's been quite a nice year. It has been quite a nice year off. But we get to it's like breaking story. I know we were like joking before about doing it in the pub, but actually sitting with your collaborator, having spent years online emailing back and forth, and and particularly people whose like English is their second language, sitting with somebody and going, and there's that amazing feeling where one of you says something and you go, oh yes, and it's that is one of my, it's almost like improv. There's that thing of like one of you says something and it sparks an idea, and then because Dave's an artist, he goes, hang on, and then draws what we just talked about, which is even better, and then goes away and does ridiculously complex paintings, which I never asked to be changed.
Yet.
Because it's really not very easy to, for you, those of you watching who don't know, Dave usually uses sort of traditional media, so it's often sort of ink on paper or paint on paper. Dave isn't really one for sort of computer drawn illustrations, so it really isn't that easy to change a page once it's been done.
I have changed it because I've not liked it before, but yeah, I do everything the hard way. I didn't know I could paint before this. I just did it to see if it worked.
Very good at it. I think it's been, yeah, so our process has had to adapt because of that, for a number of reasons, really. Because Dave has got so many ideas, because it's essentially he came to me with this idea. So to me, he has kind of, I guess, more ownership over this story, and it needs to be how he wants it to be.
I don't know. I may have done initially, but I think, you know, you've definitely left your mark on it, and it wouldn't be what it is without what you've done to it.
Thank you. No, I appreciate
in a good way.
But what we do, I guess, we break each arc. We then go away and kind of, actually, Dave is very good at taking notes. I'm really lazy, it sounds like, the more I talk. So he comes up with the idea, he makes the notes, and he paints the book. What do? I just do these video calls. Yeah, so
panic when you get the call.
That's true. So how we work is essentially Marvel style or plot first style. So
it's like a jam session, isn't it?
It kind of, yeah. And we get to the point where
we're in a band than actually working on a comic, I think.
Yeah, and that makes total sense for the kind of book it is too. It's kind of, we riff off each other, we get a page of kind of notes down, and then essentially I go away and write a very, very sparse script because I need to give Dave room to do what he does and to put the little funny moments and stuff in. So I'll write a description of what happens on the page. It's and the second book I've done where I'm not writing panel descriptions, I'm not writing everything that happens. What that does mean is sometimes Dave will do like 12 panel pages, and I would say, but I'm like, but I didn't tell him to do that. He chose to do that himself. So he has only himself to blame. And then I had to try and, so that's what our process is. Basically, I write a very sparse plot-based script. Dave paints it. I admit that's a really small bit. Dave paints it, just paints it. It comes back to me, and then I go through and kind of write the dialogue and the captions and the sound effects and stuff. But sometimes
try and make sense of it, really.
Sometimes I will change things slightly, because what will often happen is, because the art is so good and so kind of expressive, I'll actually put in less dialogue than I probably had in my head. I might have had a big speech for someone to make, but it's just a look or something in there that I go, you know what, you don't need that. Which, so then my end script ends up being quite sparse as well. Yeah, I don't do anything. I really don't do anything.
So lazy.
And less dialogue is probably a pro tip there for sort of up-and-coming creators. If you can manage it in a comic book, less dialogue is more.
And a great way to learn is by doing a book this way, because you've got the art in front of you. Whereas
I've never done a book like this. I've never done anything Marvel style before, and I've always been constrained by what I've been given by the writer. And I've done it per panel, which all very well and good, but there's so much freedom on this, and it's quite a new experience for me. And I used to do animation, so it sort of made me go back to my old animation experiences and draw on that training as well, more than anything else I've worked on as well.
So you've actually sort of preempted my next question entirely. So how do you two work? So do you work this way on all the titles you work on, or is it just this way in this book and you've got sort of different methods for different things?
Just this one. I've done, the only other time I've used Marvel style or plot first style before was on a story called Seniors, where I worked with Tanzanian artist called Azim Akbarali, who I've worked with quite a lot before. But again, it was because we decided to go kind of Alex Ross grayscale, fully painted. And so we were talking, and he was like, and I started, and I think I sent him a full script, and he's like, well, it would be better if we did this. And I kept getting these notes back, and I thought, do you know what? I'll just do a plot and you just paint it, because it's the amount of time and effort that's going into it. And we knew each other, and I think that's the key thing. I don't think if you met someone online you'd never spoken to before, Marvel style could be very risky for both of you. But if you've got a relationship and you trust each other and you've really got under the skin of the story together, it works really well, and it works differently. Everything else I do is fully kind of full script, panel 1, panel 2, etc., and broken down. I think about things like page turns and kind of get all that worked out. But this has been quite liberating for me, because it's a different way of working, I suppose. Is I'm right, you know, and it's like a script for a normal, like when I first started, when I was ridiculously coming from screenwriting, I ridiculously over explained things to artists. So I think the first issue of the interactives was 24 pages. And I think the script was 60 pages long. Now I would try to do, for a 24-page book, I'd try to do a 24-page script where possible, to try and have a bit more discipline on the amount of description I'm putting in. But where with a 7 Shades script, it might only be 3 pages long, which again makes it sound like I do very little, but some of it might be page 5. Remember that thing we talked about in the pub and that gag? Do that. And which doesn't sound like the most official way of working, but it does. But also because like I've spent so much time waiting for artists, like you write an issue and then the artist is working on it and you start writing the next one. You're always running, the artist is always running behind you. Dave tends to overtake me quite a lot, which considering he fully paints,
pages, don't I?
Well, yeah, he's got, I've done the first 4 pages for next issue. I'm like, I haven't written it yet. He said, I know, you lazy swine. Right, make this into a story. And I mean, in fairness, it's stuff that we've talked about before. But that's quite, I've never had like, geez, I'm only doing this kind of sparse script and I can't keep up with someone who's doing fully painted art. But it just goes to show kind of how good and how focused Dave is, really. I just want to do it. But I wouldn't do this with anyone else. And I think I wasn't sure we were going to work this way. It was only when we started talking more about the project and I realized kind of how many ideas Dave had. And then when he went, I think I'm going to paint this book. And I was like, oh, okay. I've got an idea for you. And I promise you, it's not because I'm lazy. It's because it's going to work better for both of us.
I think it's brought the best out in both our skill sets. I got that. From what
I've certainly never written anything quite like this before. It's not really in my voice, if that's not a cliched way of describing your writing. And a couple of people have read it and have read my other stuff and gone, this doesn't seem like you. This is the Dave influence. I'm like, well, yeah, I guess we're collaborating together.
There's a lot of people I know who know you and know your stuff who actually come up to me and said, what have you done to Pete?
I think as soon as we got, this is like a carry-on film written by Satan, which I think is the best review you can get for anything, really. Yeah, as soon as I read that, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
That is definitely an interesting review. Well, I think we've sort of wound things up on the sort of 7 Shades side of things. So, and we also need to find more work for Pete to do. So what have you guys got coming up in the near future?
It's a staring contest now.
Well, Pete and I continue with 7 Shades. We've got another 2 issues left to draw for this series, followed by the little bookend. So we may get that done this year, depending on Plague. I'm going through another issue of Dexter's Half Dozen, issue 10. I'm going through, and we're slowly putting together the second trade paperback of Dexter's Half Dozen. I think I just need to do the cover for that, and that's what I'm doing.
See, I've recently, very recently, scripted the dialogue for, is it 7th issue? I can't count. 4th?
Yes, it is the 7 Shades.
7th issue of 7 Shades. And the plan is 7 Shades and 7 Trades. That's the long-term goal.
Yes.
Because it rhymes. And because it's the right thing to do for the story, sorry. So there's that. I'm not doing as much comics as I used to, actually. I do have one thing that hopefully will come out this year, assuming enough people pre-order it. Hint, hint. So it's actually a bit of a dream project for me. So my favourite TV show as a young child was Robin of Sherwood, and I've written a story to go in an annual. So back in the day, there were annuals done for the first 2 series, I think, with Michael Praed, but they never did one for the Jason Connery series. So the idea is that this year the rights holders are going to put out an annual with the Jason Connery lead, and I've written a story which is currently with an artist who I can't announce yet, But
I can't wait to see that.
it all hinges on pre-orders. And actually, Dave has also done some artwork that will feature in the annual as well. So there's I don't know if I'm supposed to have said that or not, but I've just
I don't know if I'm allowed. I didn't mention it. You
well,
know.
okay. Well, they've said it's going to be in there.
I'm not in trouble. You are.
We'll let people know when pre-orders are available, but essentially, as long as enough people order it, then the book will happen. So
yeah, I'm really looking forward to that because Robin and Shield was a massive influence on me growing up. I still love it to this day.
Well, I think to me, when you're saying about comparing British things to American things, like yes, I would like to have at some point written Batman or something, but actually this is probably a bigger thing to me. It's one story in an annual, but if I went back in time and told kind of 10-year-old me that one day I'd be writing a story about my favorite TV show that was official, I'd first say, well, how did you get here, old, bald, bearded man? And leave me alone. And then I'd say, I don't believe you. So there's that. And I'm also, sorry, go on.
So when you asked if I'd do a pin-up for it, I squealed like a schoolgirl. I was that excited. So I can relate to that feeling that you just mentioned.
No, I still can't quite believe I won't believe it's real, I guess, until the book happens and it's in my hands. But that was good. Really enjoyed, and it also gave me an excuse to. I basically just went and watched a load of episodes and took loads of notes, and which I didn't need any excuse to dig out the Blu-rays, but it was good to do. And then I'm also doing kind of more film stuff, but going back into screenwriting a little bit. Off the back of the pandemic, actually, I got myself a couple of mentors, and that's been working really well. Again, using up people's time because they're available and they can sit in front of a computer and help me, and just trying to rebuild my confidence in that area. So I've got a short film called Shortest Day, which I've written. The original plan was me writing it for someone else to direct, but it looks like I'm going to be directing that myself, and shooting probably September, October time. Yeah, we're just looking into funding at the moment, so I can't say too much more other than that. But it's the script is written. I've got a producer. I've got a cinematographer on board, and we're all really excited about doing it. So fingers crossed. Hopefully, between that and Robin and Sherwood, and more issues of Seven Shades, the end of this year, there should be a lot of stuff with my name around it.
Yep, that's another sort of pro tip for the newer creators out there. Everything takes longer than you think it's going to take. So we're working now on things that you won't hear it out until sort of next year, end of the year before. But sort of keep putting the work in. You will get there.
Definitely.
Or find an artist who does loads of work, do very little, and you might get there.
Just runs themselves into the ground. Get an artist who burns themselves out.
He's only 21.
You don't look a day over 16.
Excellent. That's looking good. Yeah, I've also got myself involved in a film which may or may not be made, but that's still in the early days. But we're looking to crowdfund that. So once I got a bit more information on that, I'll be plugging the hell out of it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both for sort of coming along and sort of helping with this panel for Swansea Comic Con.
Yeah, I always do. Just offer my apologies.
It's been great to talk to you sort of on here, and before too much longer, hopefully we can actually sort of see each other in person and do some more in-people things. So just before we go, where would be the best place for anyone who wants to sort of follow up from this interview go to, and sort of where would they find your presence online?
There's pause. I can't remember the Seven Shades domain name, which is really embarrassing. But my own website. Pardon?
It's on WordPress, isn't it?
Yeah, but I don't know what the whole URL
No, I
is.
can't remember either.
Deadstar
Publishing.
It's slightly out of date as well. Go to the Deadstar Publishing page would be my first tip, because that's where you'll find Seven Shades and Dexter's Half Dozen. Other than that, my website is peterogers.co.uk, which I update relatively regularly about my comics work and my screenwriting stuff too. And I'm on Twitter at Pete Rogers, because I've been on it a very long time, so I got to actually have my own name. I'm on Instagram, and I think it's Pete Rogers _writer. Yeah, that's the best places to find me.
Anything from Dave?
I'm on what should I call it, on Instagram as Dave J Clifford, which is my name, and surprisingly, and Facebook because I'm far too lazy and busy to do a blog or anything else like that, which I should do.
I do, because while Dave's painting, I need something to do.
Dave spends his time painting, Pete does the words.
I think I've just destroyed the whole writers, artists thing that everyone always argues about, because everyone knows it's the artist, but I've actually broken ranks and said it out loud.
Well, as for us, you can find all the Deadstar stuff on Facebook at Deadstar Publishing, or online at www.deadstarpublishing.co.uk. So thank you both for coming here. I think that pretty much wraps it up.
Thanks very much.
Thanks very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Swansea.
Thank you.
Thank you, Swansea.